Welcome. Welcome everyone to the session on open government and the post-2015 development framework. It's my great pleasure to be chairing this session this morning. I wanted to start with a quote from this morning from Prime Minister Cameron: "Open government must be at the heart of our efforts to eradicate extreme poverty." So we look forward to a lively session, which will start with interventions from the panel, and then we'll take questions from the floor. It's my great pleasure to welcome President Kikwete, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, to welcome Minister Kuntoro, Head of the President's Delivery Unit for Development Monitoring and Oversight of the Republic of Indonesia, the Right Honourable Justine Greening MP, Secretary of State for International Development, Rakesh Rajani, the founder and head of Twaweza, and Vanessa Herringshaw, Director of the Transparency and Accountability Initiative. We'll start with some opening remarks from Vanessa. If you'd like to come to the lectern, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you all on behalf of the Transparency and Accountability Initiative and also the UK's Department for International Development. So we're here to discuss the global framework that will succeed the Millennium Development Goals, the so-called post-2015 framework. So if you ask me why should we focus on this? Well, I think that's pretty clear, as was laid out this morning. There's two main reasons. Firstly, because the development of the framework is going to involve a pivotal global discussion about how to achieve the twin aims of eradicating extreme poverty and promoting sustainable development over the coming years. And secondly, because the goals and targets chosen could have a profound impact on global and national priorities and resource flows towards those aims. But if you ask me what the new framework will be, what will be its scope, what will be its ambition, what will be its vision, well, that's partly up to the likes of us, all of us in this room and outside, and what we do to shape the content of that. It really is up for grabs. The scope and shape of the framework is already being discussed, and debates are beginning to hot up, to get really hot. There are those who want to keep it looking a lot like the old framework, largely focused on technical service and delivery targets like health and education and aid, and largely focused on developing countries. Then there are those who want a wider vision, looking for approaches that need action in all countries, shared between developing, emerging and developed countries alike. And they are looking for goals that address really underlying and root causes, issues like justice and governance, open governance. And that's where we come in. We in this room, we connected to the Open Government Partnership. Because who are we? We are people that believe that open government is crucial to getting essential things done, to delivering services, to promoting people's voice in their own societies, and to protecting dignity and freedom. Now, some of you maybe are like me. I didn't start with openness. I started with healthcare in remote areas of South Asia, and you might be able to picture those kind of remote health posts and remote hospitals. And together with great local staff, we worked on technical support and local community involvement, and it looked absolutely great on paper. But it didn't stop women dying in childbirth, in hospital, again and again and again, having to watch it again and again. And why? Because the drugs and doctors were on paper, but they were not there in reality. And because no one could see what was on paper, and because there was no way for local people to hold those responsible locally and up the chain to account, the women kept dying, agonizing deaths, totally unnecessary deaths. So it's just one example, but it's a personal example to try and show why we're here to talk about open governance in the post-MDG framework. Because without openness, without genuine citizen participation, without real accountability, we know from experience, hard experience, that the other great-looking technical commitments on paper are likely to stay there, on paper. Now, the high-level panel, as we heard, appointed by the UN Secretary-General, recognised this very clearly. Its report, under the co-chairmanship of the leaders of Indonesia, Liberia and the UK, recommended that the framework should indeed include a goal on openness and governance, and Ministers Conturo and Greening here today were closely involved in the panel's work. So far, so good. But now we're moving into a whole new phase of the post-2015 process, when governments start to negotiate between themselves. And let's be very clear, there are some very strong opposition who do not want openness to be enshrined in that framework. So we are here as the Open Government Partnership, as a group of countries and civil society that have agreed on core principles of transparency and accountability and participation, or TAP, or TAP for short. And we are here to discuss how our common values can be at the heart of the new framework. Finally, what is clear is that the new framework must be developed through a truly global partnership, and that's why we're especially delighted and honoured to have such senior representatives here from Africa, Asia and Europe. So welcome to everybody. I look forward to a very stimulating and a very important discussion about how the individual country members of the OGP and the collective strength of the partnership together can help enshrine our TAP principles, our transparency, accountability and participation principles within the new post-2015 framework. Thank you.
Honourable Minister Justin Greening, UK Secretary of State for International Development, distinguished participants. Well, I commend Prime Minister David Cameron for organizing and for convening this important meeting and for organizing so well. Well, I also thank the organizers for convening this special session on post-2015 development agenda. Let me begin by saying that there has been notable progress with regards to implementation of MDGs in the last 13 years. However, progress has not been even, varies from one MDG to another, and is highly uneven among nations and continents. We in Tanzania, for example, have achieved targets in 4 of the 8 MDGs ahead of time. On MDG 2, with regards to universal primary education enrollment. On MDG 3, with regards to gender parity for boys and girls in primary and secondary school enrollment. We are yet to meet targets with regards to parity of females and males in tertiary education, but also on positions of decision-making, particularly in Parliament. But with Parliament, I think we are now in the process of doing a major constitutional review, and if we are all agreed, we can anchor that in that and attain parity in that area. Of course, we're also on target with regards to HIV infection rates. We are supposed to be at 6% infection rate by now. We're already at 5.1. We've come a long way from over 13%, which is quite commendable. Also, we are on target with regards to child mortality, which to me is a phenomenal achievement compared to where we were in the year 2000. Of course, it is depressing to note that we are not on track with regards to MDG 5 on maternal health. But of course, we are taking measures to redress that unfortunate situation. But we don't think we'll be able to be on track by come 2015. We are still lagging far behind. Of course, we're also on track with regards to environmental sustainability, particularly on access to safe and clean water in urban areas. However, we're still lagging behind with respect to rural water supply. But of course, unfortunately, we are lagging seriously behind with MDG 1 on halving poverty and halving hunger by 2015. Of course, we have been taking a number of interventions, but we don't think that those interventions will be able to make us attain the targets by 2015. Of course, with MDG 8 on mobilizing requisite financial resources to implement the MDGs, we are not on target again, both at national and international level. Of course, at national level, we've been trying our best to increase our financial resources. With government revenue collection, we have made tremendous progress, but it has not yet been adequate enough to meet our requirements. Well, we've been getting a lot of international support, but we are short of meeting the targets with regards to international support to the implementation of the MDGs. Well, having said that, of course, Tanzania's experience typifies the situation in many developing countries, and therefore it is incumbent upon us, rich and poor, to double our or even treble our efforts in the remaining 2 years so that we reduce the proportion of unfinished business come 2015. Of course, we are looking at, we strongly believe that if we can do better, then we should be able to be on a strong footing come 2015. Of course, it is with this background that the post-2015 development agenda must, of essence, find ways of addressing what would be the unfinished business by that time, but at the same time, consolidate the gains that have been made. And one of the issues that we really need to look seriously in the post-2015 agenda is how to raise the requisite finance to be able to implement the goals that we're going to set for ourselves at that time. Because if we can do that, we may also end up with the slippages that we have experienced in these current MDGs. But of course, the 2015 agenda, besides doing the unfinished business, we should now be focused on the new targets. And in my view, those new targets must be quite robust, and we should aim ultimately, come the next decade after 2015, or 15 years after 2015, we should aim at taking all nations out of the poverty trap. Because in the first MDGs, we've been working on halving poverty, halving that, and then let's give ourselves a target that in the next development agenda, we should finish the remaining half. Or if 2/3, the remaining 1/3 must be finished. But also, then this takes us to a point where we should now look at seriously the issue of promoting growth. The productive sectors is in agricultural, predominantly agricultural countries. Now should it transit, become industrialized, and then move on to the services sector? How to do that should be one of our main focus. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we will still remain as basket cases, that always depending on assistance. But if we can really promote growth, transform, modernize agriculture, but also transit from being predominantly agricultural nations to industrialized nations, and then take to the next level where the services now become dominant. And let that be part of the development agenda. Of course, the open government partnership has a critical role to play because, as I said, it is a system where you have the greater involvement of the people. The government becomes more transparent. People get more and more information from their government. People are much more involved in the affairs of government. They are determining what they need, and the government is listening, and government plans on the basis of meeting the needs of the people. So I think if we can include the ethics or the principles open government initiatives in the post-development, or anchor that properly in the post-2015 development agenda, where the agenda itself focuses on more increasing productivity, increasing more robust growth for all nations and peoples, but with governments that are transparent, governments that are involving people. I'm sure we should do better in the next round than we have done in this round. Thank you.
If I may just ask one question, President Kikwete. Rakesh Rajani earlier this morning was talking about the importance of delivery and the relation between transparency and delivery. So we've heard this fantastic news on child mortality in Tanzania, and I was interested to know how you see the relation between child health and transparency and how the two can help each other.
Is it working? Okay. Well, with child, what it really has made it possible for us to attain the progress that we made with regards to child mortality is one is increased vaccination. Vaccination has made a huge difference. That now the vaccination coverage is over 90%. And when with the introduction of the anti-pneumonia and the anti-diarrhea vaccination, which have been the two major killers of children, and the efforts that we've been taking with regards to malaria control, I think it has really made a difference. So, but what we really have done is educating the women, increasing access to information, but also increasing access to vaccines. This is what actually has made it possible. Of course, we are not doing so well with the mothers, because mothers are quite keen on taking their children to clinics for the vaccinations. But they do the same with themselves when they are pregnant, going to clinics regularly. But the problem now comes during delivery, because the health delivery centers are not so many. So during labor and with lack of transport, they cannot walk to the clinics. So that's where we have been having a big problem on still very high maternal mortality. We've been now working on a program of ensuring that these health delivery centers are available within a radius of 5 kilometers. We're doing a number, but also we're increasing on mobile. But we are now on a program of increasing greater awareness, increasing information to women on whole issues of the services that they can access. We are working on a special program which we will soon roll out. We began to do that. We build on it. I'm sure when with the spread of the mobile phone, using the mobile phone, getting information through that, we should also be able to deal with the problem of maternal mortality. What do we call that in Kiswahili? In Kiswahili say wazazi nipendeni. And of course, wazazi nipendeni. Of course, there's also a small song. But but it is part of the Open Government Initiative. It is part of the Open Government Initiative, where we now have more information to women, knowing exactly where they can get the services, how far is it from them, from there. So we are taking this initiative, and we are seeing open government as somehow helping us. it has helped us with the children, but we are now with this initiative. Was independent? How would we say that in English? Parents love me. Parents love me. It actually translates into that. but it's more of an innovation now with regard part of the open government, because with open government we have taken initiative in the health sector, in the water sector, and education. With the health sector, of course, was also delivery of medicines, becoming more transparent. When the medical stores depot, they send medicines up to the dispensaries, local dispensaries. How does that information now be made open to the people in the village, that at least this and this medicine has arrived? When you send money to the primary school, what we want the people in the village to know that there's money that has been given to the primary school. So it is kinds of systems when how to map out the water delivery points and make that information available to the people. I think this is some of the things that we are doing under the Open Government Initiative so far. We have taken the three services first. Of course, we're also building on the others. And I think somehow these are going to help us. It has helped us so far. We think we'll do better in the near future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, President. It's my pleasure to welcome the Secretary of State for International Development, the Right Honourable Justine Greening MP. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Minister, and everybody here today. It's an absolute privilege to be able to be part of this session. I think it's a very important one because actually I believe that open government can really transform and improve the development prospects of millions of people if we are smart about how we approach it. And there's no doubt that transparency is one of these core building blocks of development. And I think it is one of the key conditions that we need in place for people to be able to lift themselves out of poverty. And I really wanted to talk briefly about a couple of things. First of all, what we're doing in international development, so getting our own house in order. And then secondly, to talk about this point that Vanessa raised and President Kikwete about how open government and all of those concepts of transparency, accountability, participation, how important they are in terms of the post-2015 framework and that debate that is now well underway on that. So if I come back to what DFID is doing, and we've been really, really clear-cut about what we want to try and achieve. We think it should be possible for anyone, anywhere, to be able to track our aid spending right through the project, from when it leaves the taxpayer right through down to when it gets to the beneficiary. We've had to do a lot of things in terms of being able to get transparency not just for ourselves but in the suppliers we use to be able to be in a position to do that better. But today, one of the other key things that we are doing to help aid all of that is launching a thing that I've called Development Tracker. And it's a new user-friendly website that will be not just there for citizens here in the UK, but actually citizens in developing countries to be able to see exactly what we are doing and the projects we are running and how UK development assistance is being spent. I've made sure that the development tracker isn't just able to be looked at in terms of countries and projects and districts. You'll be able to sign up if you're interested in particular regions and areas so that when new information goes on the development tracker, you'll get an alert. And I think it's going to, over time, become a really important tool, not just for us as a department, and I hope we can put more and different sorts of information about development on it over time, but I think for UK citizens and taxpayers to be able to see and trace where our aid money is going. I also think, as I said, it can really help beneficiaries understand what is meant to be going on around them, what they are meant to be seeing in terms of improvement. And I think that understanding of what impacts we all expect, improving transparency of governments, is really going to be key over time in taking those next steps in reducing waste and tackling fraud and corruption. I haven't got time to demonstrate the development tracker here, but I understand that tomorrow morning in the Open Aid Flows session, that starts at 9:15, but at 9:45 it will apparently be in the igloo. I didn't realise it was that cold. For people to go and have a look at. So if you're interested, do go and check it out. And over time, my anticipation is that we will look at how we can improve Development Tracker, make it better, and go even further on transparency within DFID than we've already done. Another thing that we are pushing forward on very much ties back to what President Kikwete was talking about in terms of MDG progress, and particularly in relation to agriculture and food security. We're also launching the Global Open Data on Agriculture and Nutrition Initiative. That's a joint project we're doing with the USA, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and also the World Wide Web Foundation and others. It's going to improve the data that we've all got on agriculture, on nutrition, but do that really on a global scale. So it means that we can start tracking progress better, increasing awareness of what's working on this front, and really starting to share the innovations and the best practice that is out there that can help improve service delivery and improve governance. It's a really, really important initiative, and it shows, I think, just how important this issue of transparency and open government can be in helping us up our game on development. A lot of people are getting involved with it. We've already got 40 plus public and private sector partner signatories to that new Global Open Data Initiative. So I'd really urge all of you to see if that's something that you want to sign up and become involved with. Now, secondly, I did say I wanted to talk about how I think this agenda translates into this hugely important debate that is now underway on what the next post-2015 development framework should be. We know that we have to get to an end of that, because actually the current MDGs obviously run out at the end of 2015, so we have to reach consensus on this. But I think as we go through that debate, as the international community asks itself, what are those new goals, what's that new framework and the new targets, I think everyone here, I think all of us involved in this open government partnership have a huge opportunity to really put transparency and accountability and participation at the centre of that post-2015 framework, and to really say that this isn't something that's a nice to have as part of the next development framework. It's something that's absolutely essential. It's a must-have. If you look at the core values of the Open Global Partnership, this access to government information, civic participation, and I think the role of civic society in the next development framework is a really key thing that we need to see emphasised more. Integrity of administrations, access to new technologies, openness and accountability, all of these things I think are incredibly important in having a framework post-2015 that can really be a powerful one that can make a difference. They're all vital enablers ultimately of development if we want to see that take place. And I think transparency, as we've seen here in the UK, can hold government to account, and I think more broadly can help governments themselves and people start to root out corruption. I think we can't see development take place without also seeing corruption tackled. There's a real leaching out of a system of the proceeds of growth if we don't work together to tackle corruption. And I think this OGP work that we're all involved in can be a real tool to help us combat corruption as well. I think for citizens, they can't really be empowered unless they've got information and there's real openness, there's real transparency and accountability there. I think one of the challenges we've all got on this agenda of openness is going beyond just putting data out there, but then working and working alongside civil society to make it into information that people can actually use to hold governments and indeed all of us to account. It's what people want as well. As part of the high-level panel work that the Prime Minister David Cameron chaired with, of course, President Yudhoyono of Indonesia and President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. There's a huge consultation process that was done alongside all of that work that those experts did. And interestingly, this issue of transparency and openness was in people's top 3 asks of what they wanted to see in the next development framework, that they wanted this honest and responsive government. And I think this agenda really underpins all of that. So what can the Open Government Partnership do on the post-2015 agenda? Well, I think it can play a really crucial role on this debate. The high-level panel talked about a data revolution, and I think clearly open government is a huge part of making that happen. I think we can all constantly champion this agenda, and I think that the high-level panel report and this issue of leaving no one behind but critically having a data revolution really teed up that debate for us to put open government and these values of transparency, accountability and participation really at the heart of that agenda. I think it's up to us now over the next year and a half really to make it happen. But this body of work and this grouping of people, governments and organisations I think will be key in enabling that to take place. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing the views and questions of people in the rest of this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. And if I may also just ask you a quick question, which is, you mentioned open government being the combination of transparency, participation and accountability. And empowering women and girls is also one of the priorities of DFID. And I was wondering if you could tell us how you see the open government agenda helping women and girls have a voice in governance.
I think it's key, and I think it's an opportunity but also a risk, in the sense that it's an opportunity because I think openness and the transparency agenda can really help us make sure that, first of all, no one's left behind, but certainly not half of the people in a country. I think it's a risk because we know that as of 2012, there were 300 million fewer women with mobile phones than there were men. So although information is power, we need to make sure that it's shared equally and evenly. And therefore, we should be conscious of the fact that as technology moves on, we've got to make sure that everybody has access to it. And that's where I think the risk is and the challenge is that we've got in relation to women and girls and openness. But I think overwhelmingly it's a huge opportunity, and it's another reason why it's such a powerful agenda for change.
Very helpful reminder. Thank you very much. Pleasure to welcome Minister Kuntoro. Minister Kuntoro heads the President's Delivery Unit for Development Monitoring and Oversight and will be taking over the lead chair of the Open Government Partnership. Welcome.
Thank you, Martin. Your Excellency, the President of Tanzania, Mr. Jakaya Kikwete, Excellency Minister Greening, my dear friends, Vanessa Herringshaw and Rakesh Rajani, dear colleague, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. May I begin my address with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as rightly stated that it is everyone's right to freedom to receive and impart information. The General Assembly of the United Nations proclaimed that this right to information, alongside other human rights, as a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations, and that their universal and effective recognition and practice both the member states and the people of these states are secure. It was proclaimed in 1948. Excellencies, dear friends, I intentionally start this remark with the notion of right in order to invite you to the discussion of other rights which I, as you do all, I believe, deem no less important and closely related to right to information. These other rights touch upon various social, economic, and environmental aspects. Now we are heading toward the year 2015. It is a milestone year for the UN MDG to expire. While the MDG deserve their own merit in a number of development areas, concerns have been raised, however, that MDGs have not sufficiently addressed the importance of governance. In addition, the links between all dimensions of sustainable development, social, economic, environment, with the subject of governance has largely been missing. These are legitimate points to be taken for the successor of MDG after 2015. These points are taken, and I presume they are taken quite well. The UN High-Level Panel on Post-2015, which was co-chaired by Indonesia's President, Prime Minister David Cameron, and the President of Liberia, with members from different and balanced multi-stakeholder representatives, including from the civil societies, has submitted a report recommending a development narrative and a set of proposed development goals that incorporates the central roles of governance and right to information. The report that was submitted to the UNGA last month proposes a standalone goal on ensuring good governance and effective institutions. That is goal number 10. For those who are not familiar, we have 12 goals, illustrative goals, with 54 illustrative goals. Other goals ranging from poverty, education, food, energy. But goal number 10 specifically mentioned good governance and effective institution. Ensuring that people enjoy access to independent media and information, increasing public participation in political processes and civic engagement at all levels, guaranteeing the public's right to information and access to government data, and reducing bribery and corruption, and ensuring officials can be held accountable. The narrative of the report emphasizes that transformative role of global partnership as sufficient. A development in the post-2015 is one in which every relevant actors can participate, both state and non-state actors. A development that involves collaboration at all levels and in all stages of development process, from planning to monitoring. Furthermore, the narrative of the report accentuates data revolution. Data is central to planning, decision-making process, and accountability. The centrality of data implies accessibility to information and open data, including those in the hands of public institutions. What I have been describing just now about the larger context that will define the course of our global development in the near future is indeed in tangent with the ideals and features of an open government partnership. The shared keywords are right to access to information and multiple stakeholder partnership, which are features of a successful governance mechanism. In this discussion, through a genuine partnership with civil society, the public sector is expected to be more transparent, more accountable, and especially more responsive to their own citizens. I underline what the Prime Minister mentioned this morning about the openness of companies' ownership. Above all, this transparency, accountability, and responsiveness are to be institutionalized in the structure of decision-making and public service delivery. From there on, we can expect changes in culture and norms in favor of an open government. As one of the OGP founding government, Indonesia is committed to open government practices. At the moment, it has 12 listed commitments for open government, ranging from education to police, from budgeting to extractive industries. My institution, the President's Delivery Unit, also maintains leadership on the country's open government initiative. I can share with you that the new ambitious government of Indonesia is to engage youth more meaningfully in disseminating and walking the core values of open government. High-level panel was applauded as being a truly inclusive and participatory process involving all stakeholders, including civil society, academia, business, and youth. Now, Indonesia would like to continue to carry this inclusivity and participatory torch from the high-level panel into the OGP. As OGP embarks on its broadening journey, engaging youth as change agents is crucial to ensure sustainability of OGP as a global movement. I do hope that this meaningful engagement will lead to trust building and creative collaboration in accelerating collective efforts to establish openness. With youth creativity and entrepreneurial spirit, they will offer new, fresh, and out-of-the-box approaches. Thus, youth will not only understand, but also meaningfully participate in Indonesia's open government and development agenda. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in this occasion, I would also love to share one policy experience, among other few, that hopefully might add substance to the discussion and further development of OGP. The story is about the One Map initiative. Indonesia is plagued with contested land use, and this is especially true at the local level after the country embarked on decentralization in the early 2000s. Different land users and the multiple concession holders can claim the very same piece of land. Different public institutions dealing with spatial planning and issues have different maps. And when it comes to forestry map, especially, we get confused. Every minister have their own version of forestry map. It all depends on their own particular interest. To make the story short, there is a policy demand to have a single and integrative map. This one map is made public. We put it in a website, and everybody in the country can give their comments. Accessible online, and anyone can do a ground truthing of the map. What is the moral that this story appears to tell? I imagine that open government initiative would be very much driven by domestic policy demand. In that way, the so-called commitment to open government becomes no longer something which is perceived to be imposed externally, but rather it is just a rational response to a domestic need. Now, together with all panelists sitting with me this morning, I would like to invite all of you to share your various perspectives on why we should put open government at the core of our world's development in the future. I thank you so much.
Minister Kuntoro, thank you very much. Again, a quick question, if I may. You led Indonesia on the high-level panel, and now you'll be taking over the lead chairmanship of Open Government Partnership. How do you see Open Government Partnership playing a role in the post-2015 agenda under the Indonesian leadership?
There are many things that we can share together, but the most important is by having this Open Government Partnership, we have a platform to share our experience. Every country, every nation have their own objectives, have their own limitations, have their own problems. Priorities in Indonesia might not be a priority in other country. The approach that is suitable in Indonesia will not be automatically suitable to other countries. So that's why it is very important to share, just like what we are doing this morning, to share what's been successful in my country, what's not been successful in my country, such that we can have the benefit of the success and failure. It's a long process. In the Open Government, in the high-level panel, I mentioned already that there are 12 illustrative goals and 54 illustrative targets. Every country can have their own targets, but this illustrative goal is something that is fixed. The parameter can be different. Now the question is, how can we achieve that in the coming 25 years after the year 2015? So that is something that is really important. This process of having a world better for all of us, for instance, in the fighting for climate change, the way we have to protect our rainforest domestically in Indonesia. Not everybody, not all countries in the world have rainforest, but a number of countries have rainforest. The way we develop that One Map program in Indonesia is something that maybe can be useful for other countries. That's the way I believe we can make use of what's been successful in one country and how it can be shared with the others. Thank you, Martin.
I could now welcome Rakesh Rajani, the head of Twaweza, an incoming civil society chair of OGP. Rakesh.
Thanks, Martin, and Mr. President, ministers, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Why should the Open Government Agenda matter to the important work of bringing development in post-2015? I want to share two sets of ideas. The first, briefly, the one with a little more elaborate, but I think both matter equally. Some of you will be familiar with Abraham Maslow's work on the hierarchy of needs, that once you first have to meet basic needs before you get to others. Well, in my experience, I think he was only partly right. And let me just share with you two quick anecdotes. I began my work after university with street children in my hometown of Mwanza, Tanzania. It's the second largest city in my country. And I was working with street kids who had very little. And we set up a center and invited them, and we took care of all their needs. And, we provided food, shelter, a place to shower, medicines, and so on. And there was a time after we started that almost 2/3 of them walked away. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And when we sat down with them, they said, well, we really appreciate all these things you provide for us, but some of the staff here treat us like we are nothing. So you know what? Keep your food, keep your shelter, keep your medicine. If you're going to treat us like, I won't mention the word, then we don't want to be part of that. Dignity matters, not just basic needs. My second anecdote is when I was going to university, I worked with homeless people who had no homes in Boston, USA, one of the richest countries in the world, but with poor people amidst it. And I worked in a soup kitchen, and again, we were providing food. And I remember a moment where I think I was tired, and anyway, I can make all the excuses, but I think I spoke to a gentleman who was homeless in a way that was not right. And he took the plate of food I gave him and he essentially threw it on my face. And he again said, "Keep your plate." That man, and I still am periodically in touch with him, taught me a lot about racism and about dignity and about what matters. So the reason this agenda matters is because people care about being taken seriously. People need respect. People demand respect. However uneducated, however poor, however they are human beings, and they want to be included, they want to be heard, they want to be taken seriously, they want to participate in the process of their own development. And if we don't take this into heart, I think we don't achieve it. The example of Tunisia, the Arab Spring in Tunisia. Tunisia had one of the best indicators in Africa. If you look at the indicators for health and education and economic well-being, their incomes were much higher than many, many other countries. And yet when there was a fruit vendor who was treated very badly, whose dignity was undermined, we had a revolution. So those things matter, and we should not just lose sight of them when we focus on our indicators around health and education and income and so forth. But even if you didn't care about dignity, I think the Open Government Agenda really matters for post-2015 because it can make the post-2015 agenda much more effective. It can help us bring sharper results, better results. It can make sure that our money is well spent. So if all you cared about is agriculture or about education, by focusing on an open government approach to this work, I think we can be more effective and actually get better, bigger bang for our buck and quicker and better results faster. And in relation to this, I just want to make 5 points. There are others. The first is when the MDG agenda was formed, the basic deal there was very much around aid, that the richer countries had a responsibility to provide aid to poorer countries so that we can bring development. Well, I think for many reasons I'm glad that in the post-2015 agenda aid is important but not so central. And the focus now much more is domestic resources. In the scheme of things, in my own country, for example, the potential value of oil and gas alone, let alone other natural resources, is multiple times bigger than all the aid we get. So the real issue around resources is how do we put our own resources to much more effective and better use. And you know, a lot will depend in the next 10 years in countries like Tanzania and many others as to do we set up a regime that will manage these resources in the interest of people, to turn the oil curse into an oil blessing. And related to this are other issues. I participated in a session 2 days ago on procurement and open contracting. If you look at the amount of money that governments spend in procurement, it is hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And as the point there was made is if we can just get even a 5, 7, 10% improvement, better value for money in how that procurement is done through open contracting, I think it would be worth much more, and we would be much closer to achieve our resources, our goals. My second point is also about resources, but we need to realize that the world is interconnected, and for certainly many, many countries, including this and others, the multinationals and global trade and global business are key aspects of how we develop. There's no way of hiding and getting away from them. However, there's a keen sense, I think, in many countries that we're getting a raw deal. I don't know in every case whether the allegations are correct or not, but I think overall one can sense that how come a country like Tanzania is so rich and yet we have people who are so poor? And are we really getting a good deal with these companies when they come and mine our gold, or take the gas, or do all kinds of other things, even in the big projects they build? Now, I think the way to handle that is to make sure we have a proper regime. And that's why the announcement that the UK Prime Minister made today around beneficiary ownership is really key. We need to be able to do that, to be able to track and see what happens. We need to be able to see where the money goes and follow that over time. We need to be able to understand the terms in the contracts. I think for too long the private sector has bullied us, and sometimes in cohort with perhaps corrupt politicians, to say these contracts cannot be made open. I think when I've tried to learn about this, I've seen that often those are spurious games And in fact, there is reason and good value to opening up this information for people to know. If you have nothing to hide, why are you afraid to open this up? And the global tax regime piece and the tax havens and following those, I think, is really important. The UK has 10 territories where a lot of people hide a lot of money. I think we've made a step from the G8 announcement that Prime Minister Cameron made, but I think more needs to be done. I know, for example, one of our members of parliament in Tanzania is trying to track money that is held by Swiss bank accounts and by multinationals in the Isle of Man and others. I hope that we will get cooperation from governments to release that information so we know where the money is going. My third point is about the right to information, the freedom of expression, and the free press. Let me start with the press. Look, I know that the press are no angels. In my own country, if I was a politician, I would hate them in part because they report scandals and they say things that are sometimes not true. In this country, we all know a court case has just begun a few days ago, I think, of the abuses of the press who are trying to tap into phones and do all kinds of unsavory things. So the press are no angels. But I think we know from history that it's a price worth paying because the gains that a free press brings are much, much greater than all the damage that they can do. And that the way to handle the excesses of a press is not to close them down, not to clamp them down, but to go after them like the UK government is doing in terms of the other laws we have in place, and to be able to put regulations that are fair and transparent to regulate their behavior, and to do that in a way that is, like we have in Tanzania, involves self-regulation. So it's really important, I think, to have a free press because that is the way in which people know what's going on, that people can debate what's going on. And if we have bad information in the press, the answer is give it more good information rather than closing them down. But the right to information is much greater than the press. And I think it's about the everyday things. My minister, Chikawe, here often emphasizes that it's about when a woman, a mother in a village wants to know what medicine is available in my clinic. Will I get that information? Can I go and ask how many of these antibiotics did you receive? And what am I entitled to? Can I know whether this medication is free or not free, or what is the price I have to pay for it? Can I know what money arrived from my school? Can I know whether this agriculture subsidy is for real or not, and how I can access it? It's the everyday forms of accessing information, which my friends in MKSS in India have really focused. If there's a scheme for rural employment, can I know how I can be part of it? The data around who is getting jobs and who is getting paid for it. Can I verify whether that is real or whether it is cooked up? And finally, on the access to information, right to information, it's also a way in which we can come together to solve problems. If governments share information and are open to listening to and getting information from people, we can come together and solve common problems. And it frankly takes the burden of governments to do everything all the time on their own. That leads me to my fourth point around citizen participation. The Open Government Partnership emphasizes the involvement of people. And it's important, like I said at the outset, that people want to be involved, but it's also important for instrumental reasons because people have ideas. The government, however smart it is, does not have a monopoly of ideas. The universities don't have a monopoly of ideas. The civil society don't. It's by coming together that we can come up and put our minds together and thrash out what's there and make things work. Citizens can also be very useful in telling the truth of what is going on and in unblocking things. If President Kikwete will forgive me, I'll share a story he once told me when we were starting the open government work, where in his own constituency, on the coast of Tanzania, he had received a report around how some bridges had been built. And, a very nice report saying wonderful things had been done. But it's only when he listened to some ordinary citizens there that told him that, well, maybe those bridges are not there. And this sort of story is very common all over the world. And that's why I think this Lapor idea from Indonesia is very good. Every government in the world faces a situation where the information that comes through official channels sometimes doesn't tell the full truth. And if you're interested in knowing the full truth, as the President emphasized, you need to create a mechanism and a culture and a way of hearing what is going on. Finally, my fifth point, we can make all the best plans, we can have all the illustrative examples of commitments and all the best systems in the world of doing things. But how do we know what's going on in reality? How do we know whether the delivery is working? In my own country and Tanzania and many others, I think our core problem is not our plans, it's the actual delivery. It's actually knowing what's going on the ground. And for that, I think we need to have two things that are really important. One is, as Minister Kuntoro emphasized, good, solid, rigorous data to actually know what's going on. And the way to get that often is through independent means. Sure, we can have government systems to do that, but it is always useful, always valuable to have third parties that can give us information that can either validate or challenge what official government systems are telling you. So let me just give you one example in relation to this. One of the initiatives I've been involved with in Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda is something called Uwezo, which looks at are our children learning. We have made tremendous progress in East Africa in terms of opening up schooling at primary, at secondary, and now tertiary levels to many more people. We have spent billions of dollars in building classrooms, expanding space, training teachers, and these are, under any measure, really powerful achievements. But the problem is, are they realizing their promise? Why do we send children to school in the first place? Is in order for them to learn. And we have had an exercise 4 years running now, where across these three countries, in every single district we pick 30 villages, enumeration areas. In each village, we randomly select 20 households. So in Tanzania alone, that is 80,000 households. It is far bigger than any survey other than the national census. And we do this every year. And what does this survey do? 8,000 citizen volunteers spread out across the country in Tanzania and similar numbers in Kenya and Uganda. And they do one very simple thing. They check whether children are able to read in Kiswahili, in English, and are able to do arithmetic. And we found consistently across 4 years, numbers like the following. 7 out of 10 children are not able to read Kiswahili at the level that they are meant to, despite going to school. 7 out of 10 children are not able to do arithmetic, basic sums, basic subtractions, at the level that they are supposed to. And 9 out of 10 children are not able to read in English. Now, this data is incredibly useful, because here is a government like under President Kikwete's leadership, we have tripled our investment in education. I don't know any other country in the world that has done that. Tripled. There's nobody who can argue that Tanzania is not investing enough in education. But how does this money translate into results? And this data shows us that we have a problem that we now need to fix around quality. And as we go around fixing that problem, I think we need to ask ourselves, what do we do? Do we build more classrooms? Do we train more teachers? Do we buy desks? Do we set up incentives for teachers? Do we do things like cash on delivery? How are we going to make those choices? How is evidence going to help us? And there again, open government can help us make the right choices so we make sure that the funds go to the right places. So my concluding point is as follows. I think in the post-2015 agenda, the real challenge we have is, here's a world rich in resources, but has too many people who are poor, too many people who are struggling. How do we translate those resources in a way that actually helps people and builds their confidence? I think we know two things we have to absolutely get right. We have to work in a way that involves people, that respects their dignity and engages them in the process of development. And we have to make sure that our resources and our choices, our decisions are made in the most transparent and accountable manner possible. Getting those two things right puts us on the sure footing to ensure that the post-2015 development agenda works, and I think the open government is a crucial key to getting that right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rakesh. Without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to the audience. I'll take 3 questions at a time. If your question is directed to one of the panelists, if you could mention that, that would be very helpful. I believe we have a roving mic. I'll start on this side of the room. The gentleman holding the piece of paper. Yes, you, starting. Do we have a mic? Yep.
Thank you. Oh. Yeah, I don't think my question is sort of directed to the panel as a whole. I think I heard a lot about the importance of the right to information and how important it is in terms of participation and, you know, being able to understand what's going on. But I think what I haven't heard at all is sort of a little bit the other side of it, which is the space to actually do something with that information. And I think, I mean, we have a well-documented trend now that all regions of the world, including Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, you're seeing a curtailing or sort of a shrinking of civil society space, be that both for individuals but also for organizations. And I didn't hear that addressed at all, and I like maybe just ask the panel in general to maybe comment on that, because I think that the right to information is not very useful if you're not allowed the space to actually do something with it. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of countries now, that that's simply not the case.
Thank you very much. There was a question from a lady to your left. Yep.
Hi, my name is Victoria Forsgate from the NGO Restless Development. I was really delighted to hear so many of the panel talk about civic engagement, and the Minister in particular talking about the role of young people. In Tanzania, half of the population is under 15. In many developing countries, over 80% of the population is under 25. I'd be interested to hear from the panel how you see youth engagement in particular being institutionalized into open development. I think there are examples of young people participating or being engaged in very kind of one-off or ad hoc opportunities, but how do we really make it part of the core of civic engagement and open development?
Thank you very much. And the last question, the gentleman at the back. Yep.
My name is Colin Jacobs from the British Council in the UK. My question is to Justin Greening, and it's really building on the point that Minister Kunturo made, that we have to have common learning and sharing of experience, but the contexts may be very different. And I wanted to ask Justin Greening, what would be the 3 key learning points that she would pass on both to Indonesia and to Mexico in their co-chairing of the Open Government Partnership?
Thank you very much. We'll go back to the panel at this point. So 3 questions. A question on the shrinking of civil society space, on youth engagement, both for the whole panel, and a question to the Secretary of State around 3 key points on common learning. Who would like to start?
Well, let me take the first question, and on right to information is important, but what do you do with that information? Well, I think if you don't want to do anything with the information, don't ask for that information. And for us in government who are quite keen on getting the information, normally after we get the information, we make use of that information. That's what Rakesh has said. There was a time I went to my village, and there was so much talk of having 2 bridges being built. And then I talked to the people. I said, but how are the bridges doing? I said, which ones? There are no bridges here. I said, no, it can't be true. Then I go to the rivers and see that there are no bridges. Then I take action. I call the district official and ask them, you people told me that you built 2 bridges, but the bridges are not there. So they are there, so let's go together. We go there, and the bridges are not there. Then we've arrested these guys. We've taken them to court for stealing government property. But we got some other money, and then we build the bridges while these guys are being taken to court. So in my case, really, I'm quite keen on getting information so that we can make use of that information. Improve on issues. You know, personally, I do a lot of learning. When I visit other countries, I learn how they do things and come back and see what we can do. So I give you assurance that in my case, we need information. When we get information, we do something about that information. I would like to say that.
Thank you very much. Minister Kunturo?
In the case of Indonesia, you see our experience with the One Map. That is something that is really a data that can be directly used by the people to do some checking. When it comes to geospatial data, with regard to rainforest coverage. In the past, we have the paradigm, cut trees and you get revenues. Now, we have to change the paradigm. Please maintain the forest. At the same time, you can improve your welfare as well. Now, once you have a map, and it's difficult to have a map about a rainforest, put it in the website, and everybody having a handphone or a PC, they can communicate through our Lapor system. Just mentioning, hey guy, you claim that there is a tree rainforest here, but we don't see any here. What's happening? So just based on that information, we correct our map. And vice versa. Hey, wait a minute. You claim that there is no forest here, but actually there's forest here. So this geospatial maps is something that is really easy for those people to interact with us. When it comes to figures, then it is those who are more educated who can make use of this. And I have a different story about this. I don't want to take much time to explain how we can make use of this. Thus, that geospatial information system is so important, from rainforest to the acreage of the paddy field that was claimed much higher than that actually is, that kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, perhaps I can answer a couple of the points that were made. I think on youth engagement, I think that is very, very important. I mean, it's something that I think takes some time to get institutionalised. I mean, even here in the UK, people over 18 have the vote, and yet actually they're some of the lowest voting rates of any of the demographics age groups in the UK. So I think what it means is that you need to kind of go beyond institutionalising engagement and make sure that you reach out. And I think the My World survey and a lot of the work that Restless Development did alongside that was fantastic, and I think that really needs to be an ongoing process, and it probably needs to have some investment in it from countries across the world and from the UN to make sure that that process is one that's ongoing and that can touch everybody wherever they are who are young. But I think actually youth engagement is a broader challenge for any country, whether you're in the developing world or here in the UK. Just on the question of the British Council, I guess I'd just like to start by saying thank you for the work that you're doing helping us network UK school children with Syrian school children who are refugees. We've just kicked off a Connecting Classrooms project with help of British Council in Jordan and Lebanon, which will see our school children Skyping and linking up with some of the Syrian refugee children. I think that's really important for them. On what our learning points are, I think there are lots, but if I had to pick three, I think one is data quality. I think making sure there's a consistency and a robustness to the data that is coming out. Secondly, I think the need for all stakeholders and a number of stakeholders to be involved. So this does need to include government, civil society, the private sector, a whole range of different actors if it's going to be successful. And then I think the third point is if it really is going to make a difference, the learning is you've really got to have political ownership at senior levels in countries. And we have President Kikwete here today representing Tanzania. Ultimately, you can have a bottom-up process, and a lot of this is about turbocharging that grassroots empowerment of people in civic society. But it ultimately also needs a political will at the most senior levels in government to make it happen. And I think whether it's some of the work, for example, DFID's been involved with in the state of Bihar in India, the work that successive UK governments have done on transparency and openness, I think that's ultimately the final ingredient for success.
Thank you very much. Rakesh and Vanessa, if I can kindly ask you to hold your thoughts just now. I know there's eagerness for more questions, and then we'll come back and wrap up, if that's okay. So 3 more questions. Question from the lady at the back, just there.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Cristina Lima. I'm Deputy Prime Minister of Cape Verde, and I would like to add my voice to do a strong case for open government in the post-2015 agenda. I would say that Cape Verde is a small country that people don't pay attention too much, but I want to say that, yes, open government and good institutions made a difference in Cape Verde life. We are probably the few countries that can meet the MDGs by 2015, and we are considered one of the countries best governed in Africa. We are the 26th democracy in the world. And when they ask us why we, in 36 years, we moved from less developed countries to medium-income developed countries in 2007, we used to say, and people was probably not paying attention, good governance and effective institutions. I think it makes a difference, and Cape Verde needs to that's why I wanted to insist to talk that it makes a difference. We need to do it for the 2015, post-2015 agenda. But I allowed me also to add another thing. I hope that because of dignity, don't turn this open government only a problem of African and developing countries problem. I appreciate very much the fact that the Prime Minister Cameron talked about disclosing information about companies, financial companies in the world. It's important to stress that also. We, from developing countries, we are waiting for developed countries also to set the example on that. Because without open government on private sector, we cannot also have a better world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Question from the gentleman on this side of the room? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Richard Todwong, a cabinet minister from the Republic of Uganda. Thank you, and I really appreciate all the good words that have been said about governance, openness, accountability, and all that. Now, my issue is about civil society organizations. As we open political space in many of our countries, and where we see transformation from investigative journalism to advocacy by civil society, and they competing for political space with the governance and other political parties. To me, I see some of them as stepping on the boundaries that makes them clash with governance. Now, my issue is, how do we hold civil society accountable? To whom do they report? To me, personally, as my personal observation, I've seen in many cases, especially the media and civil society, they set up government with their population and they observe like scientists in a laboratory. I don't know. I find it difficult. How do we incorporate them in governance as partners? Thank you.
And last question, yes? Just here.
Idris Mugambe from Uganda, and I work with a non-governmental organization. Honorable Minister, I'm not responding to your question. We are not competing for any space. We are actually partners in governance. And so my question goes to the President of Tanzania, and I address this to you, one, because you're President of Tanzania, but also a member of the East African community. You mentioned that you are committed to transparency, accountability, and participation at the top leadership. But I also note that the practice of what you are saying, and I think in many of the countries in the region, is different from what happens at the technical or operational level. I say this because I work with people at the grassroots. When they go to ask for information from the people at the on the technical side, it becomes very, very difficult. It's like you are begging for something that you don't deserve to get. And I want to ask how different you are going to, I don't know whether it happens in Tanzania, but I suppose it does happen as it is in my country. I don't know how different you are going to address that divide between what the politicians are saying at the top leadership and what the people who are supposed to share information actually do when it comes to civic engagement. How different are you going to do it in the OGP framework? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I pass it back to the panel, if I could kindly ask you, when you respond to the room, if you could talk just one or two sentences on how you see the next steps and how Open Government Partnership may address these issues. I think what we're hearing is that these issues are important, there's appetite to keep talking about them. What are the next steps and how can OGP play a part in those? Should we start with President Kikwete?
Let me first respond to the specific question that has been directed to me. Well, I understand. I don't think the Tanzanian situation is different. At times I also get sick. You know, you have good intentions, you want this thing to happen, but when it gets down to the government bureaucracy, it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell, the primary result. So, but we need to do more because governments normally works on papers. They like regulations. They like laws. That's why I believe our initiative on enacting a law on the right to information probably could help. But government papers is confidential, secret, top secret. This is the way governments work. So if you come there, madam, from an NGO, say I want this information, and the NGO, oh, this one, oh, no, they simply say no. But I think we are now working on how best to make sure that information easily flows. I know it's difficult. It's difficult within the government systems. At times it is also difficult for us to when you want this thing done and moving the bureaucracy to change. It's like negotiating a semi-trailer on a sharp corner. It's that difficult, but I think we do that. Well, looking at the future. First, of course, I'm totally passionate about the importance of open government. It is when there is greater flow of information and people know what is going on. You reduce the areas of suspicion. You reduce the areas of conflict. Of course, there are some people who will always try to misinterpret it, use it differently. These are always there. They'll always be there. So I think all of us should increase commitment to openness, to transparency. It is certainly it does a lot of good to the way government functions, to the way things happen. So I think we should continue to encourage ourselves to take more on the path of openness, transparency, and accountability. Doing otherwise, I think, is not healthy.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we can do it in the order of speakers. Secretary of State.
Thank you. I think you absolutely can have a constructive relationship between civil society and government. I think that's the key to success, is moving from beyond raising issues and representation to actually getting change happening politically as well. In terms of the next steps, I think there's lots of different ways of looking at this, but I think if I had to say, I think there's a whole load of continued grassroots work to be done, and innovation on tools and understanding what works and learning from that. I think that's what needs to happen at the grassroots level. I think that the private sector players need to, as we heard earlier, continue to challenge themselves about how they can play a leading role on this agenda, whether it's through things like the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative or generally taking the decision to be more open, more broadly on corporate behaviour. I think at the domestic level, clearly we've got a number of countries that are involved in the Open Government Partnership, and I think those country action plans obviously need to be taken forward and pursued successfully. And then I think at the international level, we've really talked about the fact that we've got a golden opportunity with the debate on the post-2015 development framework to really put all of these issues centre stage in that development framework. And we know how galvanising the MDGs were, so if we can really do this within the post-2015 development framework, it could be a really powerful vehicle for us to see open government more broadly pursued. And I think the final thing internationally for us to do is to continue to develop this partnership and make it a success, and make sure that this momentum that we've really been able to pick up over what I think is quite a short space of time, really over a couple of years or so, that we grow that and don't lose the momentum from these first 2-3 years, and keep that going. And as I said, I think the post-2015 debate is a really key way that we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Minister Kultur?
Maybe it's always the nature that CSO always suspect the government and vice versa. I see it everywhere. I'm going to tell you, not in this event, but in one of the session, either this afternoon or tomorrow, with regard to widening the space of CSO. But basically, we have to start from the trust, and that's very important. And when it comes to trust, from the government side, usually it comes from the top layer in the government. In my case, it's the president himself. The government is here to serve the people, period. And how do we serve the people? First, we have to declare everything that we have, starting from the individual. How rich are you? Those who are invited to join the cabinet, the government. You have to make a declaration of the asset that you have. That is something that is really very simple, but it's very important, because once it's in the public, then everybody knows who is actually serving you. That's the first step. The next step is basically all the information within the government that should be open to the public. And there is always a debate for those who are very, having a hobby in intelligence or that kind of thing, security approach, that kind of things, okay? And those who are very open. Okay? So the way we declare, we have our own Public Information Act 2008. It is very easy because in one of the articles stated that all information that is not declared by the owner, and that's the minister, to be secret, then it's open to the public. So everything is open except those. And those accepted by the ministers is also open to subject to debate, and for any group to put it in the court to reverse the decision. So that is the beginning of everything. And believe me, you start from that, then things will roll automatically toward a better trust, such that this government and the CSO, instead of watching each other, they are collaborating.
Thank you. Rakesh.
Thank you. I wish I had the text here. There is a wonderful speech that our founding president, Julius Nyerere, made, I think it was in 1957, to what was then called the Legislative Council, or LegCo. It was the British institution that allowed some limited participation. And it's a wonderful speech because he refers to how the colonial administration at that time called them troublemakers, useless, good for nothing, meddling in politics, and instead of just worrying about the welfare of the people. You know, and I think sometimes we have, that situation continuing. I think the question from the Honorable Minister of Uganda, the reality is, we know if we want development, the role of civil society is not to limit itself to just welfare. It is about politics, because politics is about how you share resources, how decisions are made, whether it's about a contest of ideas and decisions and resources, about whether what the regime is doing, the regime in charge is doing, is helping or not. I contest the government of Tanzania in terms of how it's spending its money in education, and I think that's healthy, because we both care to have our children educated, and it is that clash of ideas. Now, I'm very grateful that President Kikwete doesn't say you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be challenging our views, because that's what democracy is about, that's what open government is about. So I would say let's not worry about civil society doing political work. And I'm sure if they do crazy things, like if they commit violence and so on, there are criminal codes that can take care of them. You don't need to have special civil society legislation to do that. As I think President Kikwete said, we talk about changing a culture, negotiating this semi-trailer around a corner. It's hard work, and I think there are two things that are really important. First is to have a good legal basis, such as the right to information law. But I also think the challenge going forward, and I look to Minister Kuntoro as the lead chair on the government side, I think we need to be able to articulate, if we are serious about the OGP being about government and civil society coming together, what are the basic rules of the game around what sort of civic space must be there in the countries in which they're participating? One of the eligibility criteria we have looks at this, but I think it's a poor index. So I think we need to improve at measuring how do we know that at least the 61 member countries of the OGP and others have the right amount of open civic space with the right regulations to be able to have this partnership come together. So I think that's the first thing. And the final and second thing, and this is a challenge perhaps even more for civil society than for governments, is I think we need to demonstrate in action what we mean. So we need to go a little bit beyond just complaining, though sometimes there is a role for complaining. We need to go into demonstrating what partnership means and what difference it makes in the lives of people. Because when we do that, we will not just be a few NGOs making this noise, but the people, the citizens will like it. And every good politician knows that in order to stay in power, you need to listen to the people. So I think that's the way to do it. We need to go and demonstrate in practice what this will look like, what this new relationship between governments and people looks like. Show that and have the power, the attraction of that idea, convince governments, convince us, and convince the people of the country.
Thank you, Rakesh. Last word, Vanessa Heringshaw.
I think what we've heard very clearly is that, from all the panellists really, that the need for open governance to be at the heart of the post-MDG framework is a very, very strong argument. We need it both for the inherent right to dignity and involvement. We need it also, as Rakesh said, for the instrumental reasons that it's my belief that none of the other targets are achieved so effectively if we don't have that core values at the centre of the framework. I think what's also coming out, though, is that we need to think about this TAP. We need to be thinking about this transparency, accountability and participation, that openness alone is not enough. We need the space for the participation. We need the genuine accountability. When we're in those negotiations, we want to hear that TAP, because otherwise we're not really fulfilling what we're talking about. My last comment really is I like to get practical, three very practical things. If you're civil society, we need to get together and push strongly. If you want to meet at the front of the room at the end, let's get really practical. 2, if you're a member government of the OGP, then figuring out your stance in relation to the negotiations is going to be critical, and having discussions about the extent to which we can push as individual members, that would be very, very important, so governments. And the third thing is this issue of leveraging the OGP partnership itself. And I think we need to have further discussions about practical ways of doing it, whether it's forming a working group, whether it's exchanging communication between members who want to work together to promote that goal. Those are practical things that we can do. So let's tap and let's get really practical. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. To our panellists, to the audience, thank you.